right, what's up, guys? This is Isaac. I'm here with a different kind of interview. I'm interviewing Joe, Teton Juggler. Really stoked to do this. If you haven't checked out Teton Juggler on Instagram, he has incredible, like the most incredible tricks. Um, but we're gonna just be talking about how what he does relates to kendama, more exploring his side of things. I think there's gonna be a lot of like things that we can relate and kind of going deep on like trick attribution and stuff like that. But so Joe, welcome. Do you want to just give a quick background of how you found your place in juggling and doing backflips while juggling pins?
Yeah, well, hello everyone. My name is Joe Cronquist, also known online as the Teton Juggler. And I would say that to get into juggling, that's a long, long story, but really it comes down to I was a skier and a biker who lived in Alaska. And I skied and biked all the way up until I was in my early 20s, like 22, 23. And then I went on a journey kind of away from Alaska. And during that journey, in discovering kind of what biking and skiing really were to me, because when I left, I went full send into biking and skiing all over. Through that journey, I kind of found a common thread in those sports, which we all know about, which is just the flow state. And I researched in on the flow state and looked into more and more about it, found other practices that led me kind of to like the slack line, primarily because I was taking a lot of injury in biking and skiing. And through the slack line and then the community that I found there within, I was exposed to juggling. And I could already have, I juggled because I learned back when I was a kid by myself. I just went through this week where I really wanted to figure it out. And I learned with tennis balls and I always could do it. But when I found juggling and slackline, I went full send, man. And I knew because of kind of where I was with what the flow state was to me, that as soon as I started to realize the feedback system of juggling and how deep I could go in it, I have a video on my YouTube of this moment where you can see it in my eyes. I come to the camera and I'm like, this is it. I'm going to do this. And then I just ran with it, and I've been juggling every day since.
Could you describe flow state, what that means to you?
Oh, it's a very hard word to describe, man. It's probably going to take a lot of writing out of me to really finally put it into words, dude. But the flow state is it's so many things, it's hard to really put words on it. I think a lot of us know, especially, your community in Kendama, when you're in that space for a long time, you really get in there, man. And the flow state to me is a space where I get to find my truth, would be maybe the way to say it. It became, especially in my early 20s, the most truthful aspect of reality. If you're not in it, it's going to tell you and you're going to know. And that is so important in our day and age, because we're living in a world where truth and sense making is really all over the place. And so to me, when I started to philosophically think about what I was doing and what truth is, it just kind of became my most immediate outlet. And it is the space that I believe is the most real. I guess that would be the way to say it.
You mentioned you kind of know when you're not in flow state. Is it a feeling that you have, or maybe can you try to? I know it's hard to put words on this kind of stuff, but I think you did a good job just right now. But what? How do you know when you're in flow state, and how do you know when you're not in flow state?
Oh, lion energy, man. That's what I would say. I feel like a lion. When I'm in flow state, I'm not making decisions in anxiety. I'm not in anxiety. I am fully in it. I am like, if I want something, I will move there. And that feeling is power, and it comes, and it's not, it can be many other types of things, but when we're talking about like that deep flow that you're I think kind of trying to get to there, I'm saying a state where just, like I know in Kendama. Okay, how about this? when you nail a sick trick in kendama, and it was the trick you were going for, and now you've just got to get the hell out of there and stomp your two moves and spike that shit. When you can't stomp those two moves and spike, you're not in flow, dude. You're not in that flow like in that moment of becoming, because in that moment, you don't just stomp that trick you want. You stomp those few things with a new style and you just spike that shit. And we all have felt that. We all crave it. I don't know if we all get there very often, but that's that state that I would really say is when I know I'm in it deep, is when you're not doubting. You're just like, oh, and I'm finishing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, I find myself like chasing it sometimes. Other times, if I'm just practicing for a competition, it's hard to get in. But when I find that there's a period of my kendama practice where I don't have expectations, and I'm feeling good, and I maybe haven't played like the day before, so my muscles feel really refreshed, and I don't have a camera on me, and I just like am having a ton of fun, and everything is clicking, and I'm really perceptive and concentrative on what I'm doing. I think I describe that as flow. You see that too? Yeah.
Yeah, man, I would say that's the explicit state that we're describing. A lot of people really, though, they want to know, like, how do we get there, or how do
Yeah.
you get in there more often? And that is a journey that I've been on for years of kind of now just observing it like a river, because it moves like the moon, dude. The flow state is so hard to describe, bro. The moon is full sometimes in its radiance, and you can see outside. And that's what I'm trying to say about just being in there. And then other times that shit's gone, bro. You need it and it's not there, but it doesn't play by our rules, is what I'm saying. And a part of that, it's kind of like your dreams, dude. It's like your dreams. You're not in control necessarily of your dreams unless you go lucid. And each dream grabs you. And where I'm going with this is, it's like a stream. And the biggest part of it is that it has a narrative to it in this stream.
Okay.
And that's where I was going with the dream, is that each dream has a narrative, and you're entering into each dream, each narrative, and it's like, you know what's going on in that narrative when you're in that section of the dream, even though it can morph and change and stuff. And so where I'm going with that is that when we come into the waking realm and we're here and we're getting into that flow state, we have to do so with a narrative. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
I believe personally from watching this that the narrative is the true primary underlying like cornerstone to getting into that flow state and getting in deeper and getting in often, or getting into it when you really need it.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
that makes
Kind of getting more control on it, or just being able to access it better. Really cool. I kind of want to get into tricks that you've done and your process of, we call it lacing a trick, but for you, it's probably just landing. But something that come to mind where you're the pin with the slackline bump back up to juggling. Obviously, your ski backflip while juggling, you throw a pin up, you do a backflip and catch it, which is just so amazing, because we have a trick like that in kendama where you throw up the tama and you do a flip with the ken, but I can't imagine doing that with your body. Like, it's just really cool. And then another trick I was thinking of was those are the two that come to mind. But I guess, what's the process of like thinking about that trick, and then committing to it, and then grinding it out, and then landing it? Or do those processes always look the same, or are they different depending on the trick?
Well, they are definitely different on the trick, because sometimes things just magically come, but a lot of it can be social first, right? In terms of how the image is formed. Going out and skiing a lot and juggling, ski culture can have a lot of hecklers, and the hecklers can just be like, do a backflip, like, come on, do a flip. And so then you start to think like, okay, well, could I ever do a flip? And so
Yeah.
then putting it together took a long time, I would say. Each trick you just brought up was a course of like a lot of other groundwork built in other tricks that
Mm,
slowly came all up into that. So the image is like a, those tricks are all compounded. They
yeah.
have underneath them these other tricks that got me to figure out, okay, I've got to get my timing of my juggle to line up with the lip of the jump. And then I've got
Mm,
to get, because when you hit a jump, this is just a little side thing. When you hit a jump while you're scuggling, what I have found is you want to get that throw to where you're going to be when you land, the precise
mm,
throw. You want to get that essentially right at the top of the lip, because at the top
mm,
of the lip is when you're being put into essentially your arc, your projection isn't going to really change much after that. And so when you
mm,
throw in that arc and those physics, the club will follow your arc a lot easier, if that makes sense, than
yeah,
trying to
yeah.
throw like way behind it, or while you're in the air. In the air works too sometimes, but really I have found that like off the lip is where it's at. So I had to figure that all out through just trial and error, dude, just doing it again and again. And I would say the way that again, we go back to narrative, man. If I didn't have a reason as to why I wanted to try to get there that was bigger than all those independent tricks, I don't think I
Mm,
would have been able to just figure it out and grind it out, because they all kind of came slowly from pursuing that narrative and those images. The skills were built up over long periods of time, where I think if I just went
mm.
right after it, I don't know with my personality if I would have been able to make it, man, with
So,
how all the parts were.
just maybe for a clarifying question, when you say narrative, I think, let me get, if I get this right, but you when you started juggling and skiing, which I'm sure took a ton of time, you weren't necessarily thinking this entire time to end with the backflip, but you were just chasing that, getting better at it, being in flow as you do it. And then this narrative that's kind of, it becomes known to you of like, hey, I can try the backflip. Does that sound about right? Like,
Well, it's about listening to your intuition. And the one way to describe this narrative is that I told you that I kind of was a skier and biker, and that I kind of graduated into juggling. So I hit a point where I had this feeling and calling to go out into the woods and kind of just live out in the woods, away from society, and just kind of get a lot of silence and time. And
mm,
in that, I juggled. That's when I really became a juggler, was out there. But that was a time in my life of stability and instability, because of how I was adventuring and what flow was to me,
mm,
where I unlocked some serious stuff in my being of what we're doing out here in this flow state, and what that creative moment where those new things come forth, what that really is.
mm,
And that state of just raw becoming, where you can't predict it, you can't really control it. Like I said, it's kind of like the moon, and your skills got to be honed, you've got to be ready, and it comes and you live it. And I
mm,
lived it out there on my own in a way that gave me such immediate and direct feedback that it inspired me out there. I was truly lit
mm,
alive. And then that narrative is what I've been following into these feats that you're bringing up. So it's really hard to break them down into parts. It's more, to me, it's more about pointing to the why of why you're doing what you're doing, and what that state really is to you, and how, also, just in saying that, it doesn't come easy. It's not going to come
mm.
quick and fast.
When you say why, what is your why for exploring these skills and exploring the flow state?
uh Again, we're in territory that's like a full book. But the why, hmm, I can't describe it in words,
Yeah,
essentially. Like, I've
yeah.
touched something like a dream, where you are shown something that is bigger than you, and that you can't define, and can really wreck you too if you don't. I went to the books, and I found psychologists, and I found other people that spoke a language that could decipher what I went through, but I can't really. It's almost like it's presented in what I'm doing in the bigger scope, if that
Mm,
makes sense. Like, you have to
got you.
look at my feet and see it in your own intuitive gestalt and view, or whole. whole picture attention kind of view, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
intuitive speaking that is very hard to put words on. All I know is that I have flowed to it,
Yeah.
and it has produced things that people find valuable. And so it makes
Mm.
it real to me. And again, we're back in that real, we're back in that truth type of thing that I was talking about earlier.
So for the backflip while juggling, um, from when your first attempt, when you had that first attempt, or maybe the first idea, to when you landed it, how long did that take? Was that like a year grind, a week grind, a day grind? What was that like?
Well, um, I had already reached a pretty high level of backflipping on skis before I ever even became a juggler, and I was able to flip really big cliffs and jumps in Alaska. So the backflip was in there, and in there in a subconscious way. So I didn't really have to think much about it. It was mainly about the juggle, dude, and getting that
Mm.
throw, getting the timing lined up and consistent where I'm going to make my precise throw with my dominant hand to where I need to be at the top of the lip. That was one of the hardest parts. And then another really hard part was getting the club to land in the spot that I was actually going to like land in, especially when you're flipping, because your entire momentum is going back. So the tendency is to just throw the club straight up and not
Mm.
far enough out, because you're kind of thinking, oh, I'm throwing it out, but really, your whole brain and body is already pulling back. So it kind of, you can imagine how that goes. So it took me about, I don't know, I went to Woodward West. So I went to a foam pit, and I started to just go crazy because we only had 2 days, and we were there for only 2 days. But me and my buddy Dagan, we stayed there for 16 hours in those 2 days. And I was so exhausted. I had to take a week break, but we don't get access to those foam pits and airbags. So it was a space where I could do it safely, mess up a few times, and be okay. And then I landed it out there on the resi that first time, so within 16 hours, but I didn't juggle away fully.
Mm.
And so even though a lot of people counted it, I didn't really count it. And I came back the next year, and I landed it within, because I had jumped now a bunch and learned that timing and the precise throw. And I landed it within, like, I want to say within 2 hours
Wow.
on the resi. I mean, this is all on rollerblades. And then the ski backflip is a little bit different because you're moving a lot faster and more momentum. So yeah, I would say in total I put about 18 hours into it until
Gotcha.
I stomped it on snow.
Yeah.
But like I said, if that's just in direct going after the backflip, if we put in all the hours then of what I did to get to the level of hitting jumps like that while juggling, it would go way up.
Yeah. 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 So I'm sure throughout that grind and even attempting it on skis in snow, you were dealing with like frustration and maybe some enjoyment as well of like you getting close. How do you deal with frustration during these grinds? And maybe you can talk about like flow state and frustration.
Well, I would definitely say that I get frustrated all the time. I'm always battling it. I think we need that heat. I think that heat
Yeah.
is good, but I think that, it's a fine balance. And my girlfriend always, I think I do better than she thinks I do. But one way I would say that I have a few different methods that I've found work. I do a lot of like building up on things. So like I'll start out with juggling, then I'll start out then I'll go to slacklining, then maybe it's juggle slacklining, then I'll go and rollerblade for a little bit, and then maybe go after that like bike juggle so that I build up
Mm.
a lot of flow before I come into something. And then other times when I notice that I'm just pissed, because you can be in that pissed state for an hour and still be trying to get it, man.
Yeah.
I'll just go back to juggling. I'll go back to one of the other activities to try to like
Mm.
get back in the flow. And if that doesn't work, another thing that I have found is if I have a goal, like one of the crazy ideas, like bouncing it off the back of the line, I'll match that with another kind of bigger goal, so that I'm not just sitting there for an hour doing just the one trick. I'm doing one, and then I do it for 10 minutes, and then I'm like, and then I move to the next hard one, and then I start on that one, and that kind of just gets me in this state where then when you go back to the other trick, your body is kind of like not as stuck in the rut, and you get those moments where you can bust out and learn something, if that makes sense, or have it work. That's another way I say I've managed. But to be honest, man, I roll hot, dude.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of Canelo players do as well, especially with the string being involved. But
Oh
I
yeah,
think
dude.
as Canelo players, we can really think of like the most insane tricks, because there's so much you can do with just the Tama and the Ken together. But then there's this like the fun part of like thinking of like, oh my God, what if I do this? And then there's the part to like actually commit to it. And one of the questions I was going to ask you, maybe, I mean, maybe like the most technical trick that I think could be technical, related technically to kendama is the back, like you're on the slack line, and then you throw it up, you bounce the pin on the slack line, and it comes back to your hand. Um, did you build up to that one as well, or is that one that you just kind of committed to? But also you mentioned changing tricks, like moving to a different grind. Like, yeah, how do you manage the grinds?
Um, that one again, that one was a build up, but it originally started with a bike hit, the bike, which I recently did
Right.
too.
Yeah.
Both of these tricks were tricks I came up with last year that were dreams that kind of just were like, dude, that would be next level if I could do it off the back. And
Yeah.
then I don't know, bro. The amount of hours I put in on those are big. I don't know, man. The back bounce on the slack line beat me many times.
Yeah.
It made me break where, you spend 45, 50 minutes, no longer, 2 hours just going and zoning in on that spot in your mind of where that spot is and how you have to get that throw. And I would get the hit and look back and it wouldn't be near
Not
me. And
there.
I would
Jeez.
break, bro. Yeah. That one took me down. But again, like I said, since I have so much diversity going on with all these other things, I can just push away from things now and be like, you know what, I'm going to come back to that. I'll get it.
Yeah.
And then I go and
Gotcha.
do something else. And maybe I get taken on a whole other journey for months. And then I come back and I'm like, all right, let's reapproach. And I find that I achieve the goals. They happen.
Yeah.
They just normally take a lot longer than what you want them to take,
Yeah.
especially the ones that are so like, far out. But now I'm starting to get to a point where I believe, dude, I have an ideal and I've learned the skills and the physics so much that I'll test it out and I'll see a moment of it working. And normally that moment happens pretty quick, like within the first few
Mm,
tries. And once I see that moment, I'm essentially fucked. I'm
yeah.
going to have to now do it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like
Yeah.
now that I know that moment occurred, I know that I can birth that and it won't leave me alone, if that makes sense.
Mm, yeah.
And so that's part of that coming back to it is that if I leave something, I can't just leave it. I will probably come back until I get it the way that I feel is good. And I probably will not come back to that bounce off the line, man, from the back thing. I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done with
Well,
that trick.
it was insanely impressive, dude. Like I saw that,
Yeah.
and I think it's just one of those things too where you there's so many tricks you can do with skis and juggling and slackline, but when you get that many views, I don't want to make it all about like Instagram views, but like that you get a ton of views off some of these videos with a bunch of comments, and all the comments are like really positive at the top, and it just kind of shows how impressive it is because it just hit that level of like, yeah, there's like undoubtedly it took so much time. Like there's no like, oh, but if you do this and do that, it's not that hard. Like these tricks that you're doing are, yeah, but I guess what have you, because you've gotten popular on Instagram, has that like affected you at all? Do you still just do your thing? Do you think about it a lot?
No, I'd say that's also a big part of the grinding process. I've always done Instagram. Even before this count, I was doing Instagram and documenting my progressions of skill, a lot more documentation on other accounts, and this one just being more show. But I would say that, now that I'm interconnected with so much of the juggling community, as I know you probably feel with the kendama community, we're all there. We don't get to hang out with each other. A lot of us are all global, and so
Yeah,
that's our
yeah,
space. And we all set a standard there, and we all inspire each other there. And also, now I am reaching a much bigger platform of people. And yeah, I would say it has an effect in just motivating me more to push deeper into some of these just terrible tricks that are so beautiful but so hard, And
yeah,
it really gets you to not want to give up because you're getting more feedback than just that moment. So
yeah.
yes, when you're pursuing something like I am, where it's so individualized in terms of like juggling and not having a ton of people around me and slacklining in the same scenario, I do feel like the Instagram and the social media does really help. It also can make it worse. It's a double-edged sword, and it's a dangerous double-edged sword that I think all of us are trying to navigate,
Mm,
especially as these systems are getting more advanced and shit.
yeah, yeah.
And that goes back into narrative, dude. It really goes back into, I think you can handle these systems if you know why you're in there on them.
Mm, mm. What's your process of learning? If you want to learn something brand new, maybe like a juggling technique, do you have a special process? You just go for it? You think about that?
Yeah, I think that it's a lot of skill on imitation. I think that I'm very skilled on being able to watch how others are doing things and then mimic and then add my own. And
Mm,
I also think that I choose skills that I choose. The biggest thing that I know about myself is that when I feel this super desire to do it again and again, and it's and whatever I'm doing is in a healthy manner, I follow that, and I learn at an accelerated rate when I'm doing things that speak to that narrative, that
mm,
soul, that reason as to why I'm doing. If I pick up something new that is ready for that thing, I know it's like this
yeah,
pull, and I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I have, like I said about the juggling, I touched them, and then I was like, oh no, like I'm
yeah,
gonna be a juggler now. Like I didn't make that
yeah,
conclusion until I was like, 24, 25. I was like, oh wow, this is a new thing, and I just like
yeah,
grabbed it and knew. And so I don't skip up on those opportunities anymore. I see them as like signs, and in that is an accelerated learning that I am addicted to as well, for sure.
yeah, for sure. All right, dude, that's 30 minutes. It's kind of quick. I'm super down to do this again in the future, but I really appreciate talking to you. I think obviously you're not in the Konami community. I definitely want to send you Konama, so you got to shoot me your address. No pressure playing it, but I want you to try it out. But you're still a big inspiration, so I really appreciate the time, and I think this would be valuable for my audience.
Sweet, Isaac. Yeah, man, I appreciate the interview. I'm always down to talk about flow, man, and send me that kendama and man, I'm scared. Like I said, I don't wanna I'm focused on the juggle, dude, but I
I know.
know I've played with it enough to be like, oh no. So I'm kinda like I just said, I don't wanna get lost to it, but send it my
Yeah,
way, man. I need it now.
no pressure. No pressure. Yeah, man. All right, good talking to you, man.
Oh yeah, Isaac, good talking to you as well, dude.
All right, see you, dude.